So here we've got two dinos where both of them have got 20 mutations. The male on the left, he's got 20 mutations in melee. The female on the right, has got 20 mutations in health. And that's kind of where we start to hit this limit of 20. If we have a look at the male first, he has got 20 mutations on the patrilineal side. So you can see that he was, his father was an M19, so he'll get 19 put in his log from the father. At stage 2 of the game, it gave him a new mutation, and it decided to, log that on the patrilineal side. So that's why he's got 20 in total. If we look at the female, it's slightly different here. She's got the health mutations. Now for her, H19 male, so she's getting this log saying she's got 19 mutations on the patrilineal side. But when she got a new mutation, it was recorded as being on the matrilineal side. Now, I did do the health line first, and I thought at the time that if I'm going to breed two dinos together, I need one that's got 20 mutations on the matrilineal side and one that's got 20 on the patrilineal side. I need to keep these records clean, basically. So for that reason, I actually bred her with the male breeder, and I got these two. One's male, one's female. But the result is the same. If we look at their logs, we've now got 20 mutations on the matrilineal side. So in other words, we didn't get any new mutations. We just got her total of 20, if you will, pushed over onto the matrilineal side. I mean, if we wanted to flip it over and put it onto the patrilineal side, I could just take this male and breed him with one of the female breeders, and then, yeah, that 20 would flip over to the other side. So, what is this actual 20 limit then? Why did I stop at 20? Well, it was just because that's what I thought was the limit. As far as I could tell, I can't go beyond 20, because, I mean, you look at these records here that we've got in the ancestral line. It says 20 out of 20, which suggests you cannot have more than 20 mutations, but that's not actually true, because what I've been thinking was that if I breed the M20 male with the H20 Mark II female, I'll be okay. I mean, I'll be blending two lines, one in melee, one in health, and I'll get my final dinos that can breed together to give me the dinos for the boss fight, for instance. Just simply because this H20 female, she's got 19 mutations on the patrilineal side. They'll clash with his 20, give me a total of 39. I'm thinking, well, I can't have a baby that's got one mutation on the matrilineal line and 39 on the patrilineal line. I'm literally looking at the parents themselves to see where the mutations are. I didn't actually spot the obvious, as in, like, when you breed her with a female, when you breed her, the FH20 female with the male breeder, all of a sudden the actual log moves over to the matrilineal side. That didn't cross my mind at the time for some reason. It was only when I started breeding these two together that the penny dropped, or the light bulb came on. So, as I say, I was originally going to breed the M20 with the H20 Mark II, but then I actually thought, well, what happens if I breed these two together? What's the result? Because we're up against this 20 limit. What does it actually mean? So I bred all these, and we've got a mixture. We've got two 328s, a male and a female. We've got a 288, another 288, a 248. So all of these went through that stage 1 process where it's comparing the stats. These two on the left, they got the health and the melee, so they got the better health and the better melee. So they're 40 points higher, well, 40 levels higher, I should say, than their parents. When we breed the... I don't know what is going on with my mouse here, but yeah, my mouse is just suddenly acting up a bit. When I breed these two dinosaurs together, you're going to end up with a dinosaur that's got an extra 20 mutations than one of the parents, basically, because we're getting the best of the melee and the best of the health. 20 mutations is 40 levels, because I mean these two dinos themselves are level 288. Their original breeders were level 248. They've both gained 20 mutations. That means they've gone up by 40 levels. And when you breed them together, the result is the same. When you get both of the stats, you go up from 288 to 328. If you only get one of the stats, then you're the same level 288. It doesn't matter which of the stats you get. So this one, for instance, this one's getting the health. This one has getting the melee. This poor soul over here is level 248. He's the same, or she, I should say, she's the same level as our original breeders. She's getting the health from the male and the melee from the female. So she's getting the worst of it. But the interesting thing is, it doesn't matter which of the dinos I pick, the ancestral log that I've got's identical. 20 mutations on the matrilineal side, 20 on the patrilineal side. Doesn't matter which one I pick, I mean, I'll pick that one out of curiosity. 20, 20, that one, 20, 20. The result will always be the same, because what the game's actually doing is it's just totaling up the mutations. It doesn't care that the female's got 19 on the patrilineal side and 1 on the matrilineal side. It just wants to know what's the total, and then it records that against that dino's individual record. So with this one, for example, it's had a look at the female. She's got 20 mutations. Okay, we'll log 20. Had a look at the male. Well, he's got a total of 20. We'll log that as 20. And that's where that 20 limit now applies, because the offspring, when this was a baby, when it got to stage 2, it's a case of, well, this has got 20 mutations on the matrilineal side, so we can't give it a mutation on the mother's side because we've reached the limit of 20. And we can't give it a mutation on the father's side because we've reached the limit of 20. So we're not going to get a situation here where we get, say, 21 mutations on the father's side or 21 mutations on the mother's side. We're capped out now. The game's basically had a look and said, well, female's got 20 mutations, the male's got 20 mutations, that's it. There's going to be no more mutations created in this gene pool. So it is kind of interesting. We still get the the logs, or no matter what stats these dinos get, we still get the logs saying 20 out of 20. But if we take these two together, now these, for instance, would have been the final breeders, for instance. We would have gotten these two, a male and a female, that have got the best stats out of those two. Then we'd have bred them together to get an army that we use to take on the Manticore, for example. And this is one of the examples here. If we use, well, have a look at this one's log, you'll see it's actually got 40 out of 20 on each side. In other words, this one's parents each inherited 20 mutations from the mother and the father, giving them 40 mutations in total. So that's why we've got 40 on the mother's side and 40 on the father's side. So it doesn't actually stop you going beyond 20 when you're just breeding them together and merging the stat lines, for instance. All that 20 limit does is it just stops the parent being able to create a new mutation into the gene pool. I mean, I could create like another baby out of these two. I mean, that one is a female. So if I get a male out of these two, and then I breed these two siblings together, this one has, let's see, she's got 40 on this side, 40 on that side, so that's 80 in total. Breeding those two siblings would actually give me 80 from the mother, 80 from the father, so that's 160 mutations in total. But it doesn't matter. We're not at this stage. We wouldn't be trying to create new mutations anyway. We're just basically merging the two different mutation lines, if you will. We're just basically interested in the stats. So when we breed these two together, it doesn't matter what mutations actually are. All we're interested in is getting the best health and the best melee out of the two of them. And the game doesn't stop you doing that. No matter how many mutations the parents have got, it doesn't stop you, in stage 1 from allowing the babies to inherit those best stats. It just simply stops these two parents from being able to create a baby that's got, say, 21 mutations on the father's side or 21 mutations on the mother's side. I mean, likewise, their offspring can't have any new mutations in the gene pool. This one can't contribute any either. They're all at 20 or above in terms of total mutations. But that's also the reason why I'm breeding these two together, because I've realised, obviously, I can take this M20 beyond 20, because my only limitation is these two together can't give me more mutations. But if I breed him with the females back there, when we get to stage 2, the game can look at the female line and say, well, yeah, the female's got like scope for another 20 mutations, so she can contribute a new mutation. So that's exactly what I did. I actually bred this male here, the M20, with those females, and I actually ended up with this M47 over here. So he's actually got 47 mutations. But it was very painful. It was really slow. It took me way longer to get to 47 than just getting up to 20. And that's another reason why you want these two lines separate, because once you breed them together, it doesn't matter. If I've got, say, like this male on the left has got 15 mutations in health and 5 in melee, I've got to basically breed him and every successive male against those females, and I'm only at 20 mutations. By having these two separate lines, I've got 40 mutations in total that I can breed together straight away without any more fancy breeding on the mutation side. It saves me an absolute ton of time, because once I started breeding him, it's actually surprising. I thought it would just be like a 50-50 chance I'm not going to get a mutation. It was actually far worse. I was hardly getting any mutations whatsoever. Even though, you know, you're getting to stage 2 and the game's saying, well, do you get a mutation on the mother side, or do you get a mutation on the father side, or do you get a mutation on both sides? By taking away the chance of the father providing a mutation, it was actually quite surprising. It was just a situation where I was hardly getting any mutations on the mother's side. So I suspect what it was doing is it was like saying, well, yeah, you've got the chance of you getting a mutation from the father and the mother is slim. So it was maybe looking at the father's side and saying, no, you can't. Well, the chance of you getting a mutation, it might have decided, well, yes, you can. Oh, no, wait, you've already reached level 20. I think it was maybe doing something like that. I don't think it was comparing each one individually. So it was a case of, and it's kind of confusing to try to understand, I must admit, but the way I experienced it was that by taking away the male's ability to produce mutations, I was getting so few mutations on the mother side, even though, I mean, that's when I doubled up the number of females. I went from 6 to 12, and it still wasn't giving me that much of an improvement. So even with all those 12 females, it was still taking much longer to get a mutation on the mother's side. So yeah, there was something very strange seemed to be going on. But if I'd had a male that was, say, 15 health and 5 mutations, if he couldn't have contributed any more, and I was breeding him against, you know, all of these females, it would have taken probably like 2-3 times as long as it took me to get, you know, from here with these two separate lines. So it's definitely not in your interests to have a mixture of mutations in different stats. Focus on these two lines. You know, it's completely independent of one another. Focus on one stat at a time, and it'll go a lot better, to be honest. I mean, there's no specific reason to go beyond 20, to be honest, unless you're going to be probably doing the PvP stuff. But hey, what the heck? I mean, the opportunity was there, so I took advantage of it. But in any case, we've got this dude over here. He's an M47 male. Now, in his particular case, because of this, we're now up to 919 in melee. I mean, that's just crazy, just through mutation. But that's where I started to factor in, well, I'm up against a 450 actual total max level, you know, for the dinos. I mean, I'm not actually, that's not the case for me on a private server, but it is on your official servers. So I thought, right, I need to work out a cut-off point. Where do I stop? How far do I take that melee line? Because I'm already up to 20 by now in health. It doesn't take much to boost the health line, but how far can I push the melee line? Because there's a bit of a trade-off. Every time I do a mutation, it costs me 2 levels, whereas if I'm just increasing the dino stat using experience, it only costs me 1 level. So there has to be a trade-off here. So I had a look and thought, well, 450 level dino, 73 is the maximum number of levels you can get through experience. Trouble is, 73 levels needs 3.5 million XP. That's a lot of XP you need. For me, I think I'm more comfortable with about 1 million-ish. So I had a look at the tables for experience versus levels. I chose a cut-off point of 68 levels I'm going to use for experience. It's somewhere above, somewhere above the 1 million marker. So 68 levels means I need an actual dino, like a final breeder like this one here, that's got 382 levels. So that gives me scope to add in another 68 levels to reach that 450 cap that we've got. Now, the female H20 or H22 is going to contribute 40 levels to the actual melee dino that we've got. So it's a case of, right, I needed to take 40 off of this 382 total, so hence that's the reason we're down to 342, and that's where my cutoff was for melee. And if I'd actually taken him up to 344, I would have only gone up by 1 stat. But I would have actually knocked myself back 2 levels in terms of experience, and I would actually be at less than 1 million experience I've been able to put into these dinos before I'd hit that 450 cap. So that was a nice, comfortable trade-off for me. And it is actually interesting because you look at this like final breeder here. He's a male and he's got 20,000 in health, 919 in melee. So once I got the male, it was a case of, well, all I need is the female. So I'm just keep breeding our male here. I am 47 male with a female H20. Well, I was actually using the H20 Mark II, but I didn't really need to. But because I was getting some males, I was actually keeping the males to one side, and I was just having a bit of a play. So like this male here, he's got full imprinting. He doesn't have any extra levels, but he's got all of the imprinting. So it means his stats go up by 20%. So just by imprinting the final dinos, I'm going to have about 24,500 health and 1100 melee. That's just through 100% imprinting. So if I then put the experience in, we end up with like a 450 max level dino. I put 12 points into health, so he's on about 40,500 roughly on health. The rest went into melee. I mean, he's got full imprinting as well, but it pushes him up to 2,150 melee damage. I mean, that's going to be pretty brutal. At least I would hope so. I mean, that's a really high melee. I've never gone that high on melee before, so it'll be interesting to see what the result is. But since I had another male while I was trying to get my females, I thought, well, actually, let's see what happens if I push him beyond 450. So he's a 451. I've actually been taking him around the actual map because I'm trying to push his XP up just for the sake of curiosity. So as soon as I got him above 451, he didn't just suddenly disappear from the server. The server's been rebooted a couple of times, it's been repatched, and yeah, he's still going, he's still here, he's at 451, he's almost at 2,080,000 is the next point to get up to 452. And so it's a case of, well, he's still, he's still kicking around, nobody's like taking him away from me, so that's handy. I mean, I'm not going to keep him, to be honest. All I'm going to do is go up to 450, but to me it just like kind of shows you that, if you're not on an official server, you can go beyond 450 and it's not going to be a problem. In which case that melee level, yeah, the sky's the limit if you want. I mean, knock yourself out. But anyhow, we're at the point now where we've got all of this, we've done all of this breeding. I've got all my, I've got my final male, I've got my final females as well, and I'm ready to start breeding the army. But there is a way to speed things up and actually make things go a lot quicker. I mean, these M20s, for instance, took me a day to get to H20 and a day to get to M20. Not an entire day, literally, but spent like one day on a weekend, and that's it. I managed to get both lines done right the way up to 20 over a weekend. And I did that by using S+. Well, now that we know how to make these super duper max level dinos, how do we actually speed this process up? How do we make it much faster so that we're not wasting weeks, months, whatever it is in the normal time of, like on an official server, how do we get it down so that we can produce those boss fighting dinos as quickly as possible? Well, it's a combination of two things, at least that's how I've been doing it. One is to manipulate the server settings to speed things up, and one is to use S Plus to speed things up. So if you're running this as just a standalone game, or if you've got like admin rights to the server, so it's either a server that you're running or you know somebody who's got the admin rights on that server, whatever, I mean, you need to be able to either install the mod or already have the mod, or you need to be able to change the server settings, or you need to know somebody who will change those server settings for you. These sort of things will seriously speed up your breeding process. So one of the first things I do is to take advantage of the S Plus mod, because it's got quite a few features that allow me to, well, basically just save time. So one of those things is the S Plus hatchery. I always use this, because this thing will save me an absolute ton of time. What it does basically is it's got a certain range in which it's active. Any fertilized egg that's within range of this hatchery will be picked up and put into storage. So that alone is a major time saver. I mean, I'll just show you the range. I mean, these Tech Rexes are quite close by anyway, so it doesn't really matter that much, but you can see there's this big massive dome around the base. It's stretching like way beyond the walls, well into that side of the base over there. But yeah, it's when an egg basically lands on the floor, a few seconds afterwards it'll just disappear and end up in the storage for this thing. I'll just disable that range because we don't need to see it, but it's active all the time for me, because I mean, I'm into the tech era now. I mean, I'm running that tech generator over there and it's wirelessly powering this thing, but fairly early on in the game it's accessible. Have a look here. It's for me, you need to be level 30 to use it, but if you're not running it off a tech generator, then it needs what you call refertilizer. So if you look at that, I mean, that's at level 38. It's kind of odd. You can make this at level 30, but you have to wait until level 38 to use it, because you need the refertilizer. But anyway, you need rare flowers and you need rare mushrooms to actually power it. To create the refertilizer, and it's the refertilizer that powers it. But once you get to this area where you can make these tech generators, it's just wirelessly powered anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Now, in this particular case, I've got a storage capacity of 1000. I can change that in the S Plus settings, but it's pretty much enough for me. But the real time saver for me is the fact that while these dinos are just, going through a mating process and hatching, laying fertilized eggs, this thing's picking them up, and I can just walk away from the game. I can go around the base and do things. As long as this game's still running, as long as the map's still active, the dinos are breeding, and this is still active, I can go and do something else. Come back and say like 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever, and there's a load of eggs that have been fertilized just waiting here in storage for me. So, I mean, otherwise I would have had to basically just hang around here and watch these, Tech Rexes like glue, basically. Wait for them to pop out a fertilized egg, and then I'll have to pick it up, and I'll have to then take it over here and then pop it in front of the air conditioners. I'll have to wait for the incubation time to time out so that the egg then hatches. It saves me a ton of time. Because the other thing it actually does is it actually reduces the cooling time. It sort of like makes these conditions that are ripe for the egg to to incubate. I mean, normally your egg gets popped out onto the ground, the conditions aren't right, which is why you need the air conditioners. But what this thing's doing is it's basically picking these eggs up, putting into storage. It's making the conditions ideal for those eggs, and it's allowing the cooldown on that incubation time to go right the way down to just a few seconds basically. So if you look at these, it's saying 1 of 100. And then what I can do is I just have to pick those eggs up, pop them out in front of the air conditioner, and more or less as soon as it hits the ground, that's it, the egg will hatch. So it saves me a lot of time having to wait around, for those dinos to lay their eggs. But it also saves me a bit of time on the incubation timer. Now, to be fair, I mean, I could actually reduce the incubation timer itself. There's a setting for that, the time it takes for an egg to hatch. It affects the dinos that do gestation instead of egg laying. But most of these dinos we're using for like end boss fights are egg laying dinos anyway. So I'm talking about, you know, the things like the Therazinos, the Utis, the Rexes. So it does save me a lot of time. I just leave the timers as is, more or less, for those. It doesn't really matter. I don't have to have them super fast, because this thing's doing all the work for me, because I'm just going to leave the game running, do something else, come back half an hour later, hatch a load of eggs in front of the condition, and then go away and come back another, you know, half an hour later anyway. So it saves me a ton of time just having that alone. Now another thing you can do is you can alter the actual server settings. So you can do things like you can speed up the time that it takes for these dinos to actually mate. So you can reduce that time so it's quick for them to mate. You can reduce the time in between actual mating, because there's normally a cooldown timer. And I've probably mentioned early on in my case, I take it down to the minimum setting. You could take it to 0 and then basically they'll mate immediately after they lay a fertilized egg. The trouble with doing that is basically that if the server restarts, they'll revert to the default settings, and you could come back and find, you know, these things are now having to wait a day or more before they can mate again, so it can mess things up. So I go with the least risky option of the minimum setting that the server saves and survives a reset for. So yeah, I mean, you can tweak various timers. I don't want these mating too much, because I mean, I've got a limit on how many eggs that this thing can actually keep a hold of. I mean, if you're in an area where the conditions are actually right, if these things start laying eggs, the eggs will hatch and the baby will start to mature. The problem then is you could come back and you've actually found yourself with a load of unclaimed dinos that you're going to have to suddenly clear out. It's not as bad as it used to be. It's not that long ago where the actual dinos would actually grow up, mature, and then they'd start mating with each other, they'd start mating with your dinos, and next thing you know, you come back and find you can't get access to your server because it's just completely overcrowded. So then what you have to do is restore from a backup. Now, fortunately, in a fairly recent patch, they've disabled the enable wandering and the enable mating, so by default when the baby is born, those options aren't enabled, which means it'll just basically grow up, mature, and that's it. It won't give you any grief. But either way, you could still end up with tons and tons of like unclaimed dinos around your base if you forget to come back here, or you get distracted by something, and that hatchery even runs out of capacity. So things to bear in mind, I suppose. But one setting that is a real lifesaver for me, at least, is the maturation rate. Now, I think by default it takes about just under 2 days for a Rex to mature. So that's real days. I'm not talking about game days, I'm talking real life days. 2 days is it's a long time when you think about it. I mean, if I set these off breeding, let's say I strike it lucky, we get a baby that's got 1 level in melee as a mutation. I've now got to wait 2 days for that baby to mature. And I can't go any further in my breeding program. There's literally no point, because I'm waiting for an M1 baby to start improving the breeding line. Well, we've already got one, but I've now got to wait 2 days for it to mature before I can use it. So that's setting you back quite a lot. I mean, if you think of like the M20 dino that we've got outside, that's 20 mutations. So you're talking about 40 days or more before you'd be able to get to an M20. So that's a heck of a long time. So what I actually do is I go over to the wiki and I find out how long it takes for the baby to fully mature. And from that I work out what the maturation rate should be. So when it comes to breeding, I'm reducing that all the way down to 5 minutes. Not 2 days, 5 minutes. And that is an absolute lifesaver. So the reason I set it to 5 minutes is just because 5 minutes is enough time for me to basically quickly investigate that baby. I mean, I'll go and claim it, I'll have a look, oh, does it have the stat that I need, does it have the mutation I need? If so, then I'll keep it, put it to one side. I've only got to wait a few minutes before it'll be matured, and then we can put it into the breeding program. On the other hand, if it turns out it's not what I want, I've got enough time to get rid of it before it fully matures. Now, it doesn't really matter too much in the sense that I've got a Therazino in there that can clear out a fully matured Tech Rex without any problem, quite frankly. The bigger problem I've got is I've got dinos around this base that are on neutral. Now, if I put them into passive mode, it can cause problems for me, because if I go out into the wild with a dino and let's say I end up getting, you know, like a Capro suddenly decides to run off with me, that dino is on passive. By the time I try to whistle it to go on neutral, I'm like halfway down the map, so it's too late. So it's a case of, I want to leave those sort of dinos on neutral all the time, and the trouble is, if my Therizino's attacking an unclaimed, fully matured Rex, that Rex is going to hit back, and these dinos are going to come running to my rescue, basically, whether I need them or not. So yeah, it's a case of 5 minutes seems to be a good timer, and it just saves you a ton of time, because like I say, you know, 20 mutations, you're talking at least 40 real days to be able to get there without manipulating those server settings. So yeah, that's a good combination to have. The, you know, the hatchery, the tweaking your server settings, that'll save you an absolute ton of time. Now, there is one other thing I'm using out of S Plus, and maybe a bit controversial, I must admit, but it also depends on whether you've got a ton of element, and I mean a ton of element. Now, you can only get element on the map if you're doing the boss fight, so it's something to bear in mind, but what I've got is this thing over here, which is called an S Plus mutator. I'm just going to start these off breeding, which incidentally is something I do as another thing to save time, is all of these females here are always ready to breed. The only thing I'm doing to control this breeding program is to either enable mating or disable mating on the male. It saves me a ton of time doing that, and it also makes sure that all of them are going to be breeding. I don't have to go around every single, you know, female every single time I want to stop and start. I just control it all through the male. But anyway, I'm just starting that off because what I'm doing, because of my server settings, it doesn't take too long for the mating cycle to go and get finished. But I'm waiting for about roughly 80%, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this pulse off. It'll send out a radiation effect. It says it's a mutation pulse, but it applies a radiation effect to every dino that's within range. I mean, the range is pretty large. I mean, it's not too far. The only thing you have to bear in mind is that any dinosaur that gets caught by that radiation effect can't move until the effect wears off. And that's what it does. It only lasts for a certain amount of time, obviously. You can't actually use this mutation pulse because it has an actual cooldown effect on it. So you use it once, pulse goes out, and then you've got to wait, and it's a case of the effect wears off at the same time as that thing cools down. So it's not that bad, but it is pretty expensive to actually use it. It costs you 10 element for every pulse, and that's why I'm waiting till we get to about 80%, because for me, right, oh, hang on, didn't want to do that. I wanted to set that off. The good thing about it for me is that's good enough for me to be able to get 2 sets of eggs out of all of these Tech Rexes. Now, the reason I'm doing that is if you have a look at the actual information about this mutator, what happens is if that effect's applied at the point of conception, to the female, I should say, if that radiation effect is applied to the female at the time of conception, so that's the time it takes for the fertilized egg to be dropped, or laid, if you will, or the time for the baby to go into gestation. That's interesting. What happened there? Anyway, for some strange reason, she suddenly decided to restart. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it was because I got on. That was a bit weird. In any case, that radiation effect is now applied to these dinos, and as long as it's applied when the egg's either laid or when the mother goes into the gestation process with the baby, what then happens is that baby's going to come out with an increased chance of a mutation. In fact, it's almost guaranteed you're going to get a mutation. Now, it's actually saying on that effect that there's 1 of 2 effects applied, but that's because I've got one of these mutators. I mean, it's on cooldown, so I can't send out another mutation effect, but it's a case of I'm limited to 2 of these at any one time. So if I had 2 of these, I could actually send 2 pulses out at the same time, and the dinos would have 2 effects applied to them. That to me is going a bit too far, because what happens then is, at the moment, These babies are going to have pretty much a guaranteed chance. Not entirely, I mean, I haven't like paid that much attention to it, but we should have a very, very high chance that the baby is going to come out with a mutation of some sort. I don't necessarily, know what stat's going to get the mutation, but basically what it means is I'm saving a lot of time. Instead of having to hatch out, I don't know, 50, 60, 100 eggs or something to get a mutation in a specific stat, maybe I only have to hatch out 6, for instance. It always varies, I find. Sometimes I've got to run, say, like 1 cycle and I'll get the mutation that I'm after. Sometimes I have to run 3 cycles. Sometimes it's been that bad. Because there's no guarantee you're going to get the stat that you want mutated. You're just going to get a stat mutated. So it's a bit controversial, I'd say, if you've got 2 of these effects applied. Because then what happens is the baby gets 2 mutations for the price of 1. What that means effectively is, if we look at here, we've got a limit of 20 mutations. If that baby's getting 2 mutations for the price of 1, so it gets 2 mutations but the log says there was only 1 mutation, you're effectively doubling that limit from 20 to 40. And another thing you're doing is, it means that the level is only going up by 2, even though you're getting 2 mutations, which means you're going to be able to get a lot more mutations before hitting that 450 max level cap, for example. So I never go that far. I'm quite happy to go with 1 mutation when I use something like this, because it's just a time saver. I mean, instead of, say, hatching out 100 eggs, I'm only going to get a hatch 6, for instance. So it's not like giving me some major boost. I'm not getting some extra benefit other than a time saving. I'm going to get there eventually if I just go down the normal path of just hatching eggs out without this. This is just going to get me there a heck of a lot quicker. There's nobody else on this server, so it really doesn't make any difference if I manage to be able to breed these sort of things a heck of a lot quicker. It makes no difference. It's only a benefit to me, and it's not as disadvantage to anybody else, so I don't mind. But I won't use 2 of them at the same time. Now, you can actually change the server settings, the S Plus settings specifically, so you can have, like, say, 4 mutations at the same time, or 8 mutations, whatever floats your boat, basically. But again, I think within the spirit of the game, I think that's going way, way too far. But, entirely up to you. It's your gameplay, do as you please. For me, I'm quite happy to use it. The only problem is the fact that it costs me 10 element every time I want to run this pulse. So that's why I'm waiting until we get to that 80%, because then I'll get 2 eggs out of each pulse. It's the reason I actually started with only 6 dinos, because I was going so well with just those 6 dinos until we got to the M20. After that, I was really, really struggling to get like an actual mutation in the stat that I needed with just the 6, so I ended up doubling up to have 12 female Tech Rexes, because what I was finding is, yes, I was getting a lot of mutations still, except most of the time I was getting 250 dinos, which isn't of use. So in other words, those babies were getting the mother's melee stat, and that was getting a mutation, or something else was getting mutated, so that wasn't helpful. I mean, I'm really chasing like an M21, for instance. So I need the father's stat, but I need the mutation on the mother's side. So I was really struggling to get any further until I started to double this up. But to give you some idea as to how pricey this thing is, it cost me in total 420 element to get my H20. 420 element. That's the equivalent of 2 Alpha Dragon fights, or 4 Megapithecus alpha fights. So you've got to weigh it up. Now, for me, it wasn't too bad to get the H20, because I already had a lot of element lying around the base, because I've done the Alpha Dragon fight twice. I mean, I needed one head for the Overseer fight, and I needed one to stick on the cabin wall, basically, as a trophy. So I already had that 420, well, yeah, more than 420. I think it's 220 you get for each run. So I already had that amount of element, so it wasn't a problem getting my H20. To then go after the M20, that cost another 420 element. So that needed 4 Alpha Megapithecus fights, or the Alpha fights to be specific. And for that meant I needed 40 Spinosaurs. Now the Megalania toxin isn't so bad because you need 10 for each alpha fight. But it's a case of, if you go out to the caves, bring back a male and a female, just breed them, you'll be able to get Megalania toxin pretty easy. You get 2 for each baby. The problem with the Spinosales is that I can breed these Spinos, but I'm not going to get Spinosales out of them. All I can get those from is from the wild Spinos, and they are rare on the map. So I had to spend quite a lot of time, you know, going up and down that inlet. It starts whereabouts the green beacon is, going down to where the sea, where it meets the sea, then clearing out the fish, anything like baryonyxes, because they all share the same spawn. Among those 3 of them, I think it is. So yeah, it took a long time to get a lot more Spinosales. Now if you also weigh up the fact that to get from an M20 to an M47 then cost another 690 element. Yeah, it starts to make you think, is it really worth the time? I mean, how much time am I actually saving here? I mean, yeah, I can get mutations a lot quicker, but I'm going to have to spend all this time getting things like the Spinosales or the artifacts. I mean, the artifacts, it's pretty easy to get to go into those caves, for instance, and get the artifacts. Go in there, you'll get about 2 straight away, because you get the first one, the next one I'll spawn pretty much straight away. As long as you've got something like an otter, you can carry out 2 at a time, or in my case I was able to get 10. I could put 9 on the otter and I would be able to carry another. The only trouble is, after that second one had been taken away, I was having to wait about 15 minutes, so you can weigh it up, you can just get the first 2, go away, do something else, come back sometime later, and you should be able to get another 2 pretty quickly. But it was the Spinosales that were taking the longest for me, trying to get those, yeah, pretty pricey, I'd say. If you've got a lot of elements, not a problem, you know, but yeah, if you need a lot more elements, it's something to weigh up. I mean, give it a try if you've got access to S+, and you know, see what your results you get out of it. But just to give you a sort of like an example, we go over to this hatchery. If I take the first 6 of these are ones that they didn't have a radiation effect applied to them. The good thing about that is it gives you an idea of what it's like. So I'll just get out of the way. So we're looking for a 250 here. Sometimes I'll get 1 out of the 6. In this particular case, I haven't gotten any. All of these are level 250, so I haven't gotten any mutations out of those 6. So yeah, it's a game of luck. So you're going to have to hatch basically a lot of these out. Now I'm actually just going to dump all this because, I mean, the good thing about these tech Rexes, you're getting oil, element dust, you're getting you know, your scrap metal from the salvage, you're getting your oil and so on. But yeah, after all these tech Rexes, I'm getting a bit bored of it, to be honest. I've got so much of it and none of it's getting used now. I'm so far into the game, I just don't need it. But anywho, if we go after these last 6 instead, these ones are from the mothers when they had the radiation effect applied. So just remember, those ones we just hatched out, none of them had any mutations applied to them. So there you go, first 3, including a twin there, they're all level 250. Well, those 3, they're all level 250. Now, to be fair, we don't necessarily know what their mutation actually is in until we go in and look. But it's a case of all of them have got a mutation, so that's saving me a ton of time. But the question is, how much time are you then going to spend using the, using that S+ mutator, and then having to go out to get your element to actually power it with? So it is pricey, but just to give you an example, it took me, I mean, I think I started on like a Saturday afternoon to do the H20, and I was finished before the end of the day. And all I had at the time was these six tech Rexes plus the male. That's all it took me. I then had to slow down because then I had to start going after the element. But once I had all of the element, it took me only another day on a weekend to do the M20. It took me a lot longer to go from an M20 to an M47 because, well, yeah, by then I think I must have done something like 13 or more of these alpha megapithecus fights to be able to get that much element out of these lot. But it wasn't too bad to start with, but it is, and it's another lifesaver. You think if you're able to get like 20 mutations in the space of one day, that's remarkable, quite frankly. But it also helps the fact that, you know, obviously like the server settings are set so that we're taking like, you know, 5 minutes to mature the baby, to be honest. Without a combination of the two and the hatchery to get all the eggs, yeah, it would take a lot longer. Anyhow, I'm trying to remember where I put my big bird hunter. It's around the base somewhere, I just don't remember where I put it, because I've got another use for that S Plus mutator. Let's see if we can go and find big bird hunter, because I'm going to show you another use you can put it to, but to be honest, I don't think it's worth the effort. So I've actually got another one of them, way out here. I'm keeping it out here because what you can also use it for, I mean, you can actually change the types of dinos. You can get yourself like X variants. You can get the corrupted dinos. You can change your dinos into aberrant dinos. There's all sorts of settings, but this one here is actually set to actually change the gender of your dino. So let's say, for instance, we got like back there, we got a female M2. What I could have done is I could have brought her to here, changed her into a male, and, you know, bada bing, bada boom, straight away I've got myself a male M2. It would have saved me quite a bit of time having to breed her with the M breeder, having to hatch out all the eggs and wait until eventually I got a male M2. So that's a big time saver, but again, it still costs you 10 elements. So that's the total. When I was saying I got an H20 male, an H20 dino, and it cost me 420 element. That includes 60 elements, so I had to do 6 gender changes using that mutator as well, so that's 60. When I did the M20, that cost me 40 gender changes. When I did the M20 to the M47, that cost me 10 gender changes. So the gender changes I did going from M20 to M47 was almost the equivalent of one Alpha Megapithecus fight. So it is pretty pricey when you think, well, how much time am I really saving if I'm going to end up having to do a complete blooming boss fight just to get the element for it. So yeah, I'm not really sure if that's worth the effort. I don't think it's going to save you that much time, because it doesn't take too long. I mean, maybe 4 or 5 times you're going to have to breed the, you know, your female to the male breeder to get the male out of those two. But yeah, I went through that process and it was expensive, but at the time it felt like it was worthwhile, because of the fact the amount of time it saved me to get the actual original H20. But anywho, we are now finished. We've actually done all of our breeding. We've got our male final breeder. I've got 4 female final breeders. So I'm actually now ready to actually start breeding the actual boss army, if you know, to take on the Manticore next. But that's all for another episode. So I really do hope you've enjoyed watching this one. I hope it's been of use to you. If so, then do please leave a like, because that'll help me out a great deal. For whatever reason, YouTube seems to think, you know, like if a video has got likes on it, well, the algorithm, you know, it's going out searching for all these videos. It sees videos that's got likes on it, and it says, oh, maybe other people actually want to watch that video. So it then starts pushing those types of videos out to these other people, and then hopefully we'll get a bit of a snowball effect going here where a lot of people will actually watch the video. So yes, I really do appreciate any likes you can leave on these videos. If you're new to the channel and you'd like to see more content like this, do please subscribe. But just remember to click the little bell icon though, because then you get notifications when I send you content out. If you want to leave any comments, any suggestions, if you want to leave any feedback at all, please post that in the comment section below. Until the next episode, thanks very much for watching. Bye!